I do is worry and slave and defend you. And all I get back is that fucking face on your face. So full of disdain and resentment and always so annoyed. Well, now your sister is dead. And I know you miss her. And I know it was an accident, and I know you're in pain, and I wish I could take that away for you. I wish I could shield you from the knowledge that you did what you did, but your sister is dead. She's gone forever. And what a waste. If it could have maybe brought us together or something. If you could have just said, I'm sorry, or faced up to what happened. Maybe then we could do something with this, but you can't take responsibility for anything. So now I can't accept, and I can't forgive, because nobody admits anything they've done!
Hey, happy Mother's Day, everybody.
This is the Blood of Blood podcast.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Blood of Black Rum podcast. I'm Ryan from Cultsploitation.com, and I'm joined with my co-host Martin.
How's it going?
Well, the intention for this month that we're starting out on is to not be doing very well after we watch the movies, because we're supposed to be encountering some difficult films for the month of May.
Probably need a better title for the month, because just difficult film month, it doesn't really roll off the tongue.
I like it, but I couldn't find anything that really tied in with May, you know, like alliteratively. We could have done like mediocre May, something like that. But yeah,
well, seeing as most of our catalog of films that we have done has been like an exercise in mediocrity.
Yeah, it doesn't really work out very well because
it'd be like we're just doing the same shit we always do.
We just do the same one. We're gonna do the other film in the Mako series.
We would do the rest of the DC that we missed so
Yeah.
far. Like, all right, time to do Harley Quinn and the Birds of Prey.
Jump back into Wonder Woman 2.
You know what? I'm so glad I never got to finish that.
You missed the bullet.
How's Kristen Wiig's career now after that?
I think she's fine. Yeah.
Oh. So Keenan's still on SNL, but she hasn't lived to see another day after that. Okay.
Yeah, but we're starting out on a venture called we'll call Difficult Films.
Real quick, a little off tangent. Do you think Daryl Hammond shakes his fist every day that Keenan becomes closer at eclipsing him on the SNL mark? I think he might have.
I think he's already eclipsed him. Yeah, Keenan is the longest running cast member on SNL.
Poor Daryl. That's all he had.
And he may be the only person to ever be the longest running cast member on All That and SNL. He has that in the Guinness Book of World Records.
They should have signed up Danny Tamborelli. Could have used an SNL version of Fat Cop.
All right, but anyway, back to Difficult Films Month. I just had this idea that we would tackle some movies that have been, historically found to be difficult to watch in some manner. Difficult in this case doesn't mean like they were just shot very poorly or difficult to find or anything like that, which it could be its own separate category. You know, difficult to watch because they're so poor is definitely something that we've treaded down before. But in this case, it means like emotionally draining or
taxing.
Yeah, taxing, exhausting, and so difficult. Things that many have considered to be like very what we would call like harrowing circumstances. There's a lot of movies like that out there, but the ones that we picked for this month, and we may return to the other ones that I can think of next time, in a different month. But the ones that we picked for this month include Hereditary, Ari Aster's film, which we're going to do on today's episode. We also picked, and I say we, but I guess it was mainly me. Like I just, picked these films for you because I thought they would be fun to do.
Yeah, I suggested some and you told me to fuck off.
These are the ones that I really wanted to cover for it. And then maybe we can do others. Like I know you really want to do a Serbian film.
And Cannibal
Holocaust. Those will be difficult films month part 2.
Caligula.
So in any ways, and to be fair, I don't really even think that a Serbian film to me is not even a difficult film. It's just a goofy ass film. Once you get down to it, it's the edgelord's version of a difficult movie, right? It's just trollish in the it's how it portrays things. But anyway, those are for a different time.
I'm just more curious out of the same thing like Cannibal Holocaust. It's it's listen, I might as well be yeah, saw him.
Yeah, and I've seen Cannibal Holocaust too, and the biggest thing about Cannibal Holocaust is just that it's the animal brutality, the real animal violence. That is really the main thing about Cannibal Holocaust that would impact people watching it. That's what makes it difficult. That's what really gave it its namesake. Other than that,
it wasn't that they were actually eaten by
by cannibal
natives. People.
Yeah, no, and to be honest with you too, I will say that despite the animal violence, Cannibal Holocaust is actually a pretty good film on its own merits because it tackles a lot of things like media sensationalism, bothering native people for no reason, just because you want to know more about their tribe and stuff like that, and going places that you really don't belong.
That's like saying that the Twilight Zone movie was all pretty good, all things aside, besides the fact that a plane killed 2 people.
Yeah, and a child. Yeah, yes. But I would say the biggest thing about Cannibal Holocaust is can you stomach real animal brutality? If not, then Cannibal Holocaust is just not going to be one of those movies for you. And including many other films by Diodato and things like that where they truly did kill animals. So there are more even besides Cannibal Holocaust that we could do in that cannibal mondo subgenre, but those are for another time. The ones that we're going to do for this month is Hereditary, Requiem for a Dream. We're going to do...
Forgot your list already?
Yeah, I forgot my list. No. We're going to do Funny Games, the original, Michael Haneke's original movie, because he ended up remaking his for American audiences, I think in 1998. But we're going to do the original German version of that. Simply because it is the original, and both of them are worth a watch, by the way. But the American version is actually very good too.
It's Austrian, by the way.
Sorry, Austrian.
German.
You're right. Austrian.
Jesus.
Sorry.
It's not the same. Not even close.
And the last one we're gonna do is Von Trier's Antichrist. So those are on the docket for the month of May. Hopefully you...
I think the only film in this I haven't heard of is Funny Games.
Oh, okay.
So
we're in for a treat. So the idea was to challenge us. I mean, it's not... most of them I've seen already, but a nice, challenging thing to discuss and talk about, and talk about how these films are difficult and what makes them difficult, and how Martin felt about how they're difficult. So it should be a good time. And we're starting it out with Hereditary, Ari Aster's film from 2018, starring Toni Colette, and a movie about literally, hereditary acquiring of mental illness, and then also about Paimon, the demonic entity that a cult of affiliated people are trying to conjure after this family's grandmother and mother die. And so I saw Hereditary when it released in theaters, but you've never seen it. Yeah.
Really? It came to our local theater?
Yeah, it did. Yeah, it had a fairly wide release.
I know, but I mean, I know they released it after it got such praise, but I'm just shocked and chagrined that the Movieplex picked it up.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, but you hadn't seen it, right?
No. I've heard of it. I've heard
right, and obviously now you've heard of Ari Aster. Hereditary was really his directorial debut, but then he went on to do, after the critical acclaim of Hereditary, he went on to do Midsummer. Midsummer we did not actually pick for this, although it could easily fall within difficult films as well. It's a little bit different from Hereditary, but it is very much akin to The Wicker Man, and obviously that was a huge influence on Ari Aster for that movie. For Hereditary, we could also somewhat call The Wicker Man an influence, because it does have the cult element to it that The Wicker Man also features, and also it has that very slow burn build of some things like a miss here that The Wicker Man does very well. And if you wanted to go back and listen to our episode on The Wicker Man, which we did last summer, please go ahead and do that, because that's actually a really good episode that we had.
All it's missing is the cheese and bread and bread.
That is true, though. Yeah, we are missing all the folk songs of the
bread and cheese and bread.
I forgot about that. Yes, The Wicker Man does have the very unique folk music that really does not set the tone for that movie when you're first starting out.
Hey, what's this going on? Oh, there's just some nice folk music. English folk music.
So if you're in the horror community, I feel like it's been very difficult to avoid Hereditary's spoilers. But have you managed to? You didn't go into this knowing things?
No, I didn't.
That's interesting.
No, I mean, I know Midsummer now, inside now, but this, no, I have not really seen any spoilers for.
And that's actually surprising to me too, because I feel like it's become so ingrained now that I just don't know how you avoided it. But good for you. I mean, that's great that you avoided it, because I think one of the main things about Hereditary is that you really do need to go into it with fresh eyes and not know what's going on. And even so, I remember seeing the trailer for Hereditary, which did not really show exactly what the movie was about. It made it clear that it was about a family and they're encountering some weirdness. But the
Conjuring!
Yeah, kind of. I mean, it definitely kind of made it out to be more of just like, your regular haunted house movie. Like, oh, this family's being plagued by something in their house. And even if you look on IMDb, there's a nice, very, very brief synopsis of the movie that says a grieving family is haunted by tragic and disturbing occurrences. And that's like, that could be literally any movie for like the paranormal subgenre that, it could be anything. So props to the production and the press for not really exposing what Hereditary is about. Because if you were just to take a look at the trailer and the synopsis, you really don't have a good idea of what is going to occur in the movie. And that's part of what makes the film such a difficult film to watch, because you're not truly ready for the experience. You don't know what's going to happen. You don't know where it's headed. And the film, at about 2 hours long, is a really slow burn movie that takes its inspiration from movies like The Exorcist, Rosemary's Baby, The Omen, very family-oriented paranormal movies. But then it also kind of, it branches off into its own areas as well to give what people have deemed like a cerebral experience for a horror movie. Because Hereditary, whether you like it or not, really did break the boundary between what normal people, horror lovers, what horror lovers experience as a horror movie and what other people experience as a horror movie, because Hereditary was able to kind of cross over that boundary to grab people that wouldn't normally just be watching horror movies. It kind of had elements to it that bridged it into, family drama and some of the other elements that don't normally make it into B movies that don't get recognized by like things like the Academy, who really skips over genre movies entirely. They don't really care too much about what you would consider a genre movie.
How dare you?
Right? It's
been almost 15 years, and you're saying that Crash and The Artist aren't renowned? The King's Speech?
There is a very, very there's a Venn diagram of people who love the Texas Chainsaw Massacre remake from 2009 and The King's Speech.
I thought you were talking about the remake, the one that we just saw on Netflix.
No, that one too, right?
I was gonna say no one liked that. How dare you?
Yeah. Anything else you want to say in this intro before we move on for a little bit to talk about our beer?
But yeah, no, I know who Ari Aster is. I'm familiar that he's gained some. His films have gained a following. Mainly Midsummer's like where I know him from, but I haven't seen that either. I just know about it. Hereditary, I don't know why, kind of stayed off my radar. It's not something that like you asked me to go see at the theater, so I'm kind of surprised about that.
I went to see it with my family, actually. It was a whole family affair.
Well, I can see your dad right now. 4 characters? That's 3 too many.
Yep, that is actually kind of true. We can talk about that when we get further into the movie. Yep.
But yeah. So I was pretty blind on what the concept was going to be. Just going off the poster alone, you'd be like, oh, it's Conjuring-y.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I had to kind of go off of it. So I was kind of curious to what was going to make this difficult, taxing film to get through.
Yeah. Well, we'll talk about that in just a little bit.
Besides the runtime.
Yeah. Oh, 2 hours and 8 minutes long. That is going to be exhausting.
That's every film now. It's like, oh, at least it's not 2.5 hours long.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you really have to bolster yourself sometimes. You're like, all right, 2:45. Let me get prepared. I got my my portable urinal with me.
Got my catheter.
Yeah. And I'm not going anywhere. Mormons beware. Not answering the door.
Ding dong.
All right, so we'll take a break to talk about the beer that we have on the show today, because we do have a special delivery from our beloved Fidens Mule. From Fidens in Albany. If you've not listened to some of our episodes before, we have covered Fidens a couple times. It is a treat whenever we have it on the show, because it's so hard to get for us, because you actually have to go to the Fidens Brewery and get it in Albany, and I don't have time for that. Martin,
are they technically Albany or Colony?
Yeah,
I know
it's like Colony. Yeah,
I know the can. I know the can says Albany, but I'm pretty sure they're in Colony.
It is, yeah.
Fuck.
It's that general area.
It's right off of 5.
Yep. But they're so exclusive to get, and they have these set days that they serve the beer, and you can only get them in single cans, and there's a whole kind of stipulations.
Look at that. I'm reading I Google it right now. Fidens Brewing, 10 Walker Way, Colony, New York. You're not Albany. Don't lie. Don't lie to the people like that, you fucks.
All right, you'll have to go find them in Colony then if you're truly looking for their address.
Listen, it's like when you go to a concert and it's in Troy and they're like, well, how you doing, Albany? It's like, no, we're in fucking Troy, you dipshit. It's the other side of the river.
But we were graced by our Fidens Mule with a new beer for the show.
You even requested it.
What's that?
He even requested it.
He requested it. He wanted us to do this one in particular. So we did end up with the Fidens NM4NM4NM, which basically ends up standing for necessary means for a necessary means for a necessary means, which is sort of a in-joke with Fidens, but they made a necessary means, which is an IPA. Then they made a necessary means for a necessary means, which is a double IPA. And then they ended up making this one, which is abbreviated because of the long-ass name, and it is a triple IPA.
Not even abbreviated. How dare you?
Yeah, not even. So this one is a triple IPA basically based on the necessary means formula, which is Mosaic and Citra hops. That's really, the two things that are hopping this beer with, some additional grains and stuff like that. But the two hops that they're focusing on here are Citra and Mosaic, and those are fairly common hops to use in IPAs. But in this case, this triple IPA really goes above and beyond what you can even expect from most hazy IPAs with those hops, the Citra and Mosaic. This is insanely good. It is a really special beer. It immediately once you crack into it, you just get the insane amount of hop flavors to it. The citrus element, the juiciness, and the smoothness of the triple all really come out, especially considering this 10% alcohol content. It is extremely smooth, very what you would call pillowy. And I am a huge fan of this triple IPA, which is interesting considering the fact that most of the time I tend to find triple IPAs actually go a little bit too far for my taste because they end up getting a little bit sweeter. They end up getting maybe too much rosiny flavor to push them over on the bitterness scale. In this case, that does not happen. This is an extremely smooth, very vibrant tasting beer.
Yeah, as I'm taking a sip. I agree. We've done a couple other beers on here because they're local, and I've called them boutique because they're so bougie. But I mean, the reputation that they've gained, and they're world renowned at this point. People go all over the goddamn place just to come up to our little neck of the woods to get this stuff that they basically sell out of the shed. The reputation's well earned. I have not had a beer by them yet that I would say is bad. Everything they've made so far is great, and one of my favorite ones that we've had so far is the necessary means for a necessary means, the double of the necessary means. I actually haven't had the regular necessary means yet. This is delightful. It's great. Like Ryan, I'm not usually a big fan of triple IPAs because you hit it's kind of like with a lot of imperial stouts, you eventually hit that point where it's okay, the alcohol and what you're doing to it is kind of overtaking what the beer is supposed to be. Here, that 10%, you don't taste it at all. It's rosiny, which I love. It's got that nice Mosaic hop, which is one of my favorite hops because it does give that nice bitter, piney, citrusy, rosiny taste to it. It's pulpy. It's it looks like just fresh squeezed orange juice. It doesn't really have too many citrus notes. I wouldn't really you'd be kind of hard pressed to say that it's NIPA-y because it's not really juicy. It's more like a West Coast IPA, which is kind of a forgotten thing these days. But I really enjoy this. This is one of the best beers I've probably had in a long, long, long time. It's just absolutely delightful, and it hits just a lot of notes in an IPA that I love. I like the more rosiny IPAs. I like that nice bitter taste. It's one of the reasons why I miss pale ales so much. Because you got that nice malt and pale, hop balance, and you do get a nice little malty biscuitiness to us. I like this a lot. It's great. It's just a damn shame that it's like $10 a beer.
Yes, thank you, Fidens Mule, for grabbing this for us. Really appreciate that. And I just want you to know,
we do need to go down there though. It's not like it's that terrible of a hike for us.
it's true. It's not. It's just finding the time to. But
You got kids, so you have an excuse. I don't.
that's right. Yeah, it's definitely a thing that I would like to do at some point. Just haven't had a chance to get down there at a time when they're open and have their beers for sale. So, all right.
I can't wait for the day when they finally open up like a fucking food park for it, because it's probably gonna be the most ridiculous shit you've ever seen in your life. Like,
yeah, it'd be like a gastropub.
Like, here's like the most like fancy. Like, we got this salmon for our salmon rolls, freshly caught by our brewmaster out on the seas of Tokyo. He was out there on the sea of Japan himself catching tuna, and he brought it back and skinned and seared it himself.
He was part of Wicked Tuna.
But
all right,
look at that, and they got all these jobs. They got a brewer, assistant brewer job open, a cellar person. Too bad they don't tell you what the pay is. What's the pay? Come on, maybe I want to quit my job.
yeah, right. All right, so on to Hereditary. So I think one of the things that I find really attractive about Hereditary is its opening quietness. It is a film that really emphasizes the slow burn nature of its plotting. And ultimately what we get is a movie that starts out very slow, very quiet, very methodical, with a pacing that really emphasizes the character development of this family that we're meeting for the first time. And as we move through, it incorporates a lot of eerie things that we notice here and there. Most effectively, I think, is when we're at like the funeral for Annie's mother, who has just recently passed away. The film is very quick to note that she is a secretive person. She certainly was odd in some capacity. At the end of her life, she wasn't really all there. And that sort of speaks to something like dementia, where, it's understandable that at a certain point in their life with dementia, you get to a point where you don't really recognize your mother anymore because she's no longer that same person. They lose their normal personality. They sort of slip into this sort of baby-like demeanor where they actually regress. And that makes sense. But then the film sort of incorporates that into its plotting moving forward to say, you know what, wait a second, like maybe she's always been somewhat of a weird lady, and she had these weird quirks about her, and she believed these interesting supernatural phenomena, and that it sort of continues to creep along at that slow pacing, using Millie Shapiro's character Charlie as the main focal point. So what did you think about the opening there and how it really uses like that quietness in its atmosphere?
It was good. I liked the whole we got to see the miniature setup of the house, and it kind of slowly panned in, and then as it panned in, it turned into what's actually happening in the film. I liked it a lot.
Yeah, and I think too, like the interesting elements to this movie is that its characters really do seem fleshed out. They don't have, a very generic portrayal of what you would expect from a family. Ari Aster really takes the time to show the differences in each of the personalities of these characters, and as we go along, we kind of get to see that a lot of them are not so well adjusted. Like Charlie obviously has her own quirks. She's not, popular in school. She doesn't have friends. She's not really sociable. And she has these really weird figurines that she's been building, with like bottles and like Gold Bond and birds' heads that she cuts off that she finds dead by her school. And so the film sort of capitalizes on these slow, methodical, eerie elements, and a very effective score from what's his name? I'm forgetting. I just had it pulled up too. He's the composer. Here I am fumbling here for the
Colin
composer.
Stenson.
Yeah, that's what it is. It has a very affecting score that sort of shimmers in the background. It sort of is there, but also acts as like more atmospheric, because a lot of times there's just like a very thudding, pounding like bass tone in the background that sort of gives a suspenseful feeling to it that I think works really well. And I think the element of that quietness is so effective because it doesn't really give the viewer a feeling of what to expect. Obviously, you know that these weird things are occurring, but you don't really know what's going to come or where the film is leading to. And then you get about 45 minutes in. And at 45 minutes in, we get the film's like main surprise, the brutality that just comes out of nowhere, of an extremely suspenseful moment in time where Charlie is at a party, accidentally eats a cake that has peanuts in it. We know that she's allergic to that from an earlier scene, and we have Peter who's trying to get her help, but they're off at some extremely ridiculously expensive mansion that some teenager is throwing a party at.
First off, bunch of bullshit. Who goes to a fucking high school party and someone's sitting there chopping nuts up?
That's what I was thinking too. I was thinking, wow.
For a fucking cake. That's ridiculous. That's not happening.
Someone's just like, hey, grab the nuts. We've got to make a cake for this party.
Not only that, like I mean, it's 2018. People are sensitive to like nut allergies at this point. You think like, anyone got a nut allergy? No. Yep. People would be like, don't put that in there. Someone could be allergic.
I do agree. The nuts is a unrealistic factor here.
Not only that, I will say, points to this film in the part where we get to see the opening, where we see their bedrooms. It's the first film in like fucking film history where the room isn't just cluttered with shit on the walls, neatly organized, like just like shit everywhere. Like it's an actual person's bedroom where there's like, it's minimalistic.
Mm-hmm.
So props to them on that. But the whole like, hey, we're going to a high school party. Hey, you know what I'm going to do? What's that? As I'm, taking shots of tequila, gonna eat some nuts. Chop some nuts up.
But there's that scene afterwards where she's going into anaphylactic shock, throat's closing up, and Peter's driving her to the hospital, trying to get her there as fast as possible, speeding down these country roads, and out of nowhere, the scene occurs where she sticks her head out the window and gets her head taken off by a rogue telephone pole.
Because there was a dead deer in the road.
Yeah.
Rule of thumb for those who are driving and are young. When you see a deer, don't veer.
That's right. That's a good. This film is like a PSA, right? When you see a deer, don't veer. That's actually like, it should have been on the screen.
I saw that on like Reddit, but I mean it is true. Like fucking veering's gonna only cause you more problems. You hit a deer, your car's gonna be fucked up maybe a little bit, depending on like how your hood's scooped, but you'll be okay. You veer, you could fucking hit a telephone pole or something, or something worse.
Yeah, and I just took a defensive driving course, and that's exactly what they say too. should you try to avoid the deer if you're going head? No, you should try to graze it, but you don't need to like whip the wheel, as happens in Hereditary, because, you know, let's say best case scenario, you take your sister's head off with a telephone pole. Worst case scenario, you die. But
you summon a cult.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Well, the worst case scenario then happens in Hereditary. Not only does he take his sister's head off, they summon a cult as well. So, worst case scenario from veering from a deer. The fucking deer. That's the real villain of Hereditary, by the way.
It's the deer.
One deer. One dying deer.
No, that and weed.
That is true as well.
What's your sin? Oh, I didn't drink because my mom asked, "Are you drinking?" No, I'm just gonna smoke pot, Mom. Oh, okay.
I hit a nasty ass bong. So what did you think of the surprise beheading?
Well, okay. First off, before we kind of even talk about that, it takes like half an hour to get there. It's like we get a nice slow burn, pretty well paced, you know, seeing the family dynamics, what's going on, how they live their lives, you know, and how they interact. And we get to kind of see throughout that time period that everyone's pretty normal. The grandmother was kind of a weirdo, had some kind of mental illness. Mental illness runs in the family. You know, her father apparently had it, and so did, you know, her brother. And Charlie, at this point, from what we see, you would suspect the same thing. She's like, is she autistic? Is she like manic? You know, is she depressive? She's she's got obviously something, you know, mentally wrong with her, because she's not, you know, as like sociable and with it as she should be at that age. Mm-hmm. Which kind of makes her mom saying, "Hey, go to the fucking school barbecue at this dude's house."
She's not even asking. She's like, you're going to this party because
like,
I'm tired of you being, you know,
a mopey little shit.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, like, you know, I get it from that point, but at the same point, it's like, whoa, your son's like 16, 17 years old, and then you're like, hey, your brother's in like fucking senior in high school, and you're in like 8th grade, 9th grade. You want to go to a school party where they're probably going to be drinking, there's drugs and shit? Go right ahead. You fucking need it. Do a line of coke. I don't care. Just don't do peanuts. But
just don't do peanuts. Yeah.
So I mean, like, you know, it's like it's a nice build, and then we get like, you know, we're seeing her react to like eating the nuts, and it comes out of nowhere, but beautifully out of nowhere, because like, okay, where's this? You know, we're a half hour in. Where's this film going? Like. Because at that point, you can either say, like, eventually, like, we're going to get into kind of some supernatural stuff. Maybe this is just going to be a grounded film, and we're going to just focus on, like, you know, mental illness as it actually exists, and how people, you know, deal with it in modern times. And that's where you get the psychological horror element from. Nope. Kid gets her head lopped off. It's hilarious. Well executed, but hilarious. And then Peter's reaction of just sitting there and be like, oh shit, and then like, you know, you just see his eyes kind of roll back, and like him being like, and then drive home with, you know,
yeah, it's definitely it's
all it's missing is like the Home Alone do 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 do.
That would certainly be a different rendition of the scene, right? That'd be like the inappropriate Christmas music.
Just like rolling back up, you know, like to the house. I'm dreaming it of a white.
You know, this might also be a time for the inappropriate Holiday Road, where as the car starts, when he lets off the brake and starts rolling, and you see that one scene of the car rolling, that's when Holiday Road kicks in. Yes. That would be a super inappropriate Holiday Road.
Holiday Road.
But I will say that this scene is really, I think, is one of the biggest scenes that makes this a difficult film. It is out of nowhere, unexpected, completely visceral, and yet you don't really see anything in this scene until it obviously cuts away later on. But you don't see the aftermath, and that's really one of the big things about this scene that works, is because we're really seeing it from Peter's point of view. We're looking directly at Peter. We're seeing Peter process this or attempt to process this. We're seeing him like immediately in a form of shock. And there's that really good moment where, you know, he lets like one tear down, and then he goes to try to look in the rearview mirror, and then just immediately, no, I can't even look at what just happened in the background. And then he drives off and drives home. And I think the quietness of him pulling into the driveway, like slowly walking to his room, and even you hearing the parents like, oh, whew, they're home. They're home. They're good. And knowing what just happened, and then Peter goes to bed, is a very, very dark moment for this movie. It goes in a way, to a place with grieving that really few films manage to do with something like this, with such a brutal and visceral moment. You know, if you watch other films, a lot of them will show death, but they don't really go through the grieving they don't really go through the grieving process. They'll show it, and then, you know, oh, it's a couple weeks later, everyone's better, you know. Everyone took their Xanax, they're all good now. And this film really shows you moments that feel really awful, that are like stuck in the grieving process with a family that doesn't really know how to move on from the trauma of what just happened, and is sort of stuck in that moment. And, you know, like I said, with other movies, you might see the traumatic moment happen. Somebody dies, they die in a car accident or something like that. And then you don't get to see the grieving process, and you don't get to see the family not knowing how to cope with it. And then you move on from it from there. This film is showing you something that it's almost like you're not supposed to see. It's kind of taboo. You don't focus on the grief of the person in the moment. And Hereditary does. And I think that moment when, you know, Peter wakes up and you just see Peter's face, he knows what's coming. He knows, and is just waiting for the moment when someone notices that Charlie's dead in the car and headless. And it happens to be Toni Colette, and she gives a ridiculously realistic wail of grief that I think is really affecting. And I remember seeing this movie in theaters, and I remember that whole moment. Probably it's like 15 minutes of moment of, you know, the beheading occurring, Peter driving home, Toni Colette actually finding the body, and then the funeral element of her wailing through like the entirety of that funeral element, saying like, I just want to die. I remember it being completely silent in the theater. And there was actually quite a few people in the theater at this time. We talk about sometimes how the theater is really empty, but in this case,
I'm shocked.
No, there was actually quite a few people in the theater, and it was dead silent, like, because I feel like people were still trying to figure out how to process that themselves, and see it through the eyes of like Peter and Annie of what just happened. It's a really, I don't know, it's a crazy moment for Hereditary. I think it is one of those things that really sticks with you when you see the movie, and it's so surprising because it just comes out of nowhere. You just don't know how to react to it, and I think that's really the purpose of it. It's like, how do you react in a situation like this where something terrible happens, and you have to try to process that and figure out where to go from here. And the film is exploring what that means. Now, it's also exploring it in the midst of mental illness, where we know that Toni Colette's, Annie's family, has a history of mental illness in some capacity. Her brother and her father both had mental illness, and so obviously the element of the title of the movie, Hereditary, is in some way attempting to explore what it means to know that you have mental illness in your family and then have all these really terrible traumatic things happen to you. I think it's a crazy scene, and I was curious what you thought about how that played out, in terms of, what it does for Hereditary. Because like we said, it happens about 45 minutes into the movie. There's really nothing to get you prepared for that moment, and then the film really takes off from there in a completely different direction, with the whole cult element in Paimon. So I wondered what you thought about that difficult scene.
I think it was good. I think definitely one of the strong suits of this film is the acting. Toni Colette is great. Alex Wolff as Peter is great. Gabriel Byrne is tremendously understated. That's why you need a man, because you need a man to be able to process these things with whiskey. But no, I really like that. In my own head, I kind of wish that the film kind of stuck to being grounded, and instead of adding this cult nonsense, that they kept to like the theme of mental illness, and then dealing with that in family, dealing with grief in family, and how grief can potentially trigger, the worst of us, and maybe trigger some mental illnesses that we've had before that, maybe you've been medicating, or going to therapy, but with this tragedy, you lose sight of that. I think that would make it a much more interesting film. And
then leaning into the fact that Paimon is actually real.
Yeah, which I will say I do, which even though it's kind of like something I'd like to say, like, at least from my perspective, what I would like to see, just from dealing with like this kind of stuff in my own family, I would have loved, I do appreciate though that Paimon, like, the old thinking of like mental illness, of demons being in your body and your soul, that's a great connection, so like it does work, and I do think it works well having that connection, because oh, why are you having these tremors? Well, you just got ghosts in your blood, type of thought throughout human history. So I mean, that is a good connection that they're making there, but I would have preferred personally to see them more focus on mental health and mental illness.
Yeah, I can see that
instead of tying it to, no, the cult is real.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely can see that. I think that that's when I first saw this movie, that's what I preferred to. I preferred if the film had treated it like what we're seeing is from the perspective of someone who clearly is not doing well mentally. And in truth, the film really does play it off as though Paimon is real, and the cult is really out there attempting to sway this family and bring Paimon into the world, utilizing the body of Peter. And I like, when I first saw the movie, I really wanted it to see it as though this could have been just the mental illness of the family, sort of trying to reconcile this with the cult. But on second viewing, it is definitely here that it's really truly a possession film. That this is, they're bringing something into the world that they shouldn't, and that it's truly that instead of mental illness. I think it really it does tackle the elements of mental illness. Certainly Annie's, I'm not taking away anything from the fact that Toni Collette's portrayal of Annie is certainly well within the grounds of mental illness, in that it quickly becomes mental illness for her as to what's happening, especially with that trauma, because obviously she's stuck on the fact that she cannot, she can't bring Charlie back, and there's nothing that she can do because she is a person that needs to do something. There's nothing that she can do to fix this. And
that's not necessarily true, because once they do the seance, it's clear that it's not her, and it's not mental illness. It's the ritual and Paimon that have been controlling her. And it's the same thing with the whole, why has she been sleepwalking? Well, she hasn't been sleepwalking for years. It's not because she's like taking these pills. It's because she's away from her mother, who runs these seances. And so it's the same thing. Like, she started sleepwalking again once, she tapped into doing those seances that are trying to set up the ritual for Paimon.
Yeah, but I mean, in some ways, there is mental illness here too, and that happens before they bring Paimon in. And that I shouldn't say mental illness. It's not mental illness. It's traumatic grief. It's dealing with the grief of wanting to bring Charlie back and not being able to manage the fact that you don't have control over it. And that's the reason for her little miniatures, because she does have control over those things. She can control the view of what's happening in her life through the aspect of maneuvering the miniatures as though she's, a godlike figure. And that's why she kind of it's extremely morbid, but she recreates the beheading scene in miniature, and Gabriel Byrne comes in and he's like, what the fuck are you, basically like, what the fuck is this? Like, what are you doing here? But all
we're missing from that is sometimes that is better.
Right. But it's really her attempt to be able to have some sort of control over that and to be able to view it, in, as she says, in a neutral capacity. Because even before they bring in the whole Paimon element of having the seance, they have that really powerful moment at the dinner table with Peter where Peter brings up it looks like you have something that you want to say to me. Like, we've been tiptoeing around it. Why don't you just say it? And then she just outright, entirety of her grief and frustration just pours out of her in a really intense scene at the dinner table. I think it's a really great moment. Toni Colette is excellent in this movie. Like, throughout the entirety, she really puts in a lot of work. Her facial features are extremely expressive to the point where they are part of the reason why the film has some terrifying elements to it, because of Toni Collette's expressions. She does a really good job with all of that, and I think that her acting really pulls this together, but it really does also have that great element to it of at the dinner table having this conversation where she just lets her grief pour out in her frustration. It's a amazing moment. And apparently Hereditary had a lot of those moments that were actually even cut out of the movie, because it was about 3 hours long before they cut some of those family dynamic moments out. So, I will say I would like to have seen more from Gabriel Byrne. I think he does a really good job as the understated Steve. Like, he's there and he's kind of trying to hold this family together. And, every time we see him, he's like a little bit more exhausted. I wish we had seen more, because I do like that understatedness about him of just, like quickly becoming more and more frustrated and tired of of Annie's antics, I would say. But I think he does a really good job with that. Later on in the movie, like you were saying, we do get the whole element of Paimon actually coming to be a real thing that's occurring. And it does pull in a lot of those elements that we were talking about, like the Exorcist moments, the obvious Omen and Rosemary's Baby influences here. What do you think is the best moment of like the Paimon possessions?
What's the best one?
Yeah, like the one that was your favorite, like, scene where it was actually Paimon really controlling like the people or the characters, whatever, one of those scenes.
I really like the seance. Mm-hmm. Getting to see that, and then how we don't know if it's Charlie or if it's, they don't say Paimon, but
this is the second seance, right? Not the one that she shows Annie the cult.
No, not the like. Oh, this is my grandson.
My grandson.
Yeah. No. The one that they do at home. I really like that, and then you don't know if it's like, because again at this point, as soon as they start talking about Paimon, and the fact that like, oh, they're trying to, he's trying to be reborn. It's like, okay, Charlie was weird, not because like mental illness or something, but because obviously a demon was in there. All makes sense. You can't eat like candy bars like that and not be a creep at a funeral.
You know what I like about that scene with the seance is that it, first starts out like, oh, it's Charlie, and then it quickly becomes something else where you and the family are like, ooh, maybe we shouldn't have done that. Yeah, like, oh, that was a mistake to do that. I really like that because I think it, like seance scenes are dime a dozen in possession movies, but I think Hereditary uniquely does this one where it really does feel sinister. Like it starts out very, very nice and, oh, we're talking to Charlie and she's conversing with us, and then immediately becomes sinister.
Yeah, I really like that.
One of my favorite parts is like the whole element of Toni Colette just randomly being around in the house when Peter wakes up, and just like in the backgrounds up on the wall, like Spider Tony. I think that's a really effective moment because I have to say I really want to see more of films that are not extremely in your face about things in the background of the movie, like scares that happen in the background, because a lot of movies are like, hey, did you see that? It's in the mirror. Hey, did you see that? Like, we want to point it out to you. Here's some sound effects to point it out to you that it's in the background in the mirror. Hereditary kind of like just lets it go. It doesn't really draw attention to anything. You obviously see it, but it's allowing like the viewer to have control over when they notice that it's in the background. And I like that a lot. I think that more movies need to rely on that instead of just like the regular musical sting to prompt audiences, because I think that's more effective. The other thing that I think you mentioned too is that you really liked that. Well, I don't know if I would say you liked it, but you were startled by that scene where Peter slams his own face into his desk.
Yeah, that was startling. Not just, it was mainly the way he slammed his face into the desk, and then the way he retched and recoiled. That made me go, oh shit, for a second. Like, oh, that is like a little. Which it's been a long time since I've been, not trying to brag or anything, but it's been a long time since like horror films generally made me go like kind of retch a little bit, like, oh shit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really effective scene as well. It does really sort of come out of nowhere. And I do think that Hereditary has those moments. I think that's what sets it apart, is that it has those cerebral moments and it has those actual scare moments too. It's a very disturbing movie in a lot of respects, and I think it does that really well. So I guess that kind of leads us up to the end of the movie with Paimon and the actual crowning of Paimon and things like that, where the cult kind of sort of, they just appear in their house, and the dead body of Annie's mother is in the attic, and things start to get really, really crazy.
How did no one smell that?
Well, like I said, they had an expensive house. It's extremely well insulated, and whoever did the insulation should certainly get a pay raise, because good for them.
That's why I don't understand. Like, how do you not smell the fucking rot up there? Like,
yeah, because it's been there for a while. It's been there for
at least a week. Enough to have all those, more than a week. It's been months.
Yeah. I don't know how they've been smelling it. But what did you think of how it gets crazy and it really goes for the Paimon element to it?
It's fine. again, because I'm not, I wasn't too crazy overall on having, it being tied to a demon. I mean, I think it's fine. I was more interested in like the build going up to that, and seeing the breakdown of, the mother watching, Toni Colette as Annie, watching her kind of fall apart, watching Peter falling apart mentally, and then watching, by that point, Gabriel Byrne as Steve, like, be like, I've had enough of this bullshit. That, to me, that was more interesting than the whole, now that you got ghost in your blood, and we have a demon to summon. Mm-hmm. I don't think the ending was bad, by any means. I actually, again, for what they were trying to do, I think it was very well done, and very in line with, I can't remember which one. Which one is it where, like, the protagonist at the end, like, jumps out the window to try to kill themselves? It's not. I mean, it's kind of like, I was going to say, he throws himself down the stairs, but I feel like there's another one where they actually throw themselves out a window. I mean, it was cool to see, as, the demons taking over Andy, and she's sitting there with piano wire, like, chopping her head off. It's kind of nifty, but I mean, at the same time, I think it would have been a much more interesting film if it's. You can have that stuff happen, but be like, why is he seeing that? Schizophrenia, and like leaning more into that,
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think that I would have preferred it without Paimon being an actual real entity, but I do think that it does a good job with actually doing the paranormal element to it, and I think it gets crazy enough at the end with all of its weird surrealistic visuals that it works, and that's where I think the film lost my dad, like you were talking about before, is the craziness at the end, and that Paimon actually being real, because he didn't really think or expect that would be the case, that it would actually go and lean into the paranormal element. And
at that point, with like what they've been building up, there's no like what they had been doing, there's no like turning back and like, oh, it's just in their fucking head, because then that would have felt even cheaper. Like, like, okay, you've already like leaned so hard into the paranormal aspect. Mm-hmm. If you like pulled back at the end, like pulled the rug out, you'd be like, what the fuck? That would be like unacceptable,
right?
Because you'd be like,
how could that possibly be?
Yeah, because at that point, I mean, even like with like a quarter of the film left, it's obviously leaning into the paranormal and not leaning into the mental illness aspect of it. So again, I thought the ending was well done, and I liked it. For what it is. I mean, again, but my whole critiquing crux would be, I would have preferred it to be more centered on it being more just cerebral, but they didn't do that. He didn't do that, so this is what we had, and I think he did a damn good job with it. Mm-hmm. Even if it is Rosemary's Baby meets the end of Exorcist.
All right, so let's give Hereditary a rating. So on a scale of 0 to 10 peanut brittle cake, what would you give Hereditary?
I'd probably give it an 8 out of 10. Could be on future watches, maybe an 8.5. I do think it's very good. It's incredibly well shot. The shot we didn't even talk about it. The shot composition in this film's great. It's got that nice Wes Anderson symmetry, which makes it even that more haunting. The acting in the film is terrific, from Toni Collette and Peter Wolf, and Miley Shapiro. She does a really good job of being creepy. The premise is really good, even if it is borrowing from every fucking possession film under the sun. It's a very enjoyable film. I really like it. Is it groundbreaking? No. Is it revolutionary? No. But it does what it's trying to do well. It's not even close to being as scary as The Exorcist. You know, they were even saying that about, like, Evil Dead, like, the scariest films. Like, you know, the remake, scariest film since The Exorcist. It's like, shut the hell up. No, stop. Because it's incredibly hard to beat. And this film, though it has scary and traumatic moments in it, I wouldn't really say it's a hard-to-watch film. It wasn't really that emotionally draining. It's just another psychological horror film to me.
Oh, that's interesting.
So I wasn't really that emotionally taxed watching this film. So, maybe, I don't know. Maybe I'm a psychopath, sociopath. I don't know. It was just like another, like, yeah, that's another film.
I am interested. I think that's interesting that you didn't really find, like, the beheading and the grief after, and the, you know, the element of being really stuck in this family grief cycle that seems like almost we shouldn't be seeing. That it wasn't difficult.
No,
You were just like, whatever. The family member got beheaded. I don't know.
Because we've seen, I mean, maybe it'd be more impactful if this is like the first time we've seen a beheading in the film. You're right. When we see people die in most films, we don't get to see the grieving process. But even still, like, I don't think watching what they go through alone is, like, hard to watch. Because, again, I don't think they focus on it long enough. Because it's within 15 minutes after that, we're going on to, well, you got demons in your blood. Again, if they maybe focused on more about, like, the psychological aspect, then yeah, it'd probably be a harder film to watch. But other than that, like, no, because the fact that you're focusing on, well, there's actually this cult of, you know, a coven that's trying to bring back one of the 8 kings of hell, Paimon, it loses its impactfulness. So it doesn't really make it, you know, a hard to watch film. At least in my eyes.
Interesting.
Maybe if I watch it more, and I'll find it more draining emotionally and psychologically. But overall, no, I didn't find it to be draining on my mind.
I would give this film an 8.5. I think it's a really solid horror movie that does feel a little bit different from especially recent output. I think Ari Aster does have a good view of composition and the slow burn. I think he does a really good job with that. Nice surprising elements to it that you're not really expecting. And I do think that Ari Aster has this really unique ability to center on this, like, the sinister and the very visceral elements of grief that don't normally happen in movies that is able to accomplish in Hereditary. If you don't find the element of, like, Charlie's death disturbing or difficult, then I don't know that Midsommar will be either. They kind of go hand in hand a little bit, but I do think that they both have this, you know, interesting ability to show a really unedited version of grief that perhaps only certain people can even understand if they've been through it. And I think that Hereditary does a really good job of that. In any way, Toni Colette does an excellent job here in pretty much everything that she does, from the actual elements of grief to the transformation later on in the movie where she's somewhat possessed by Paimon, and the ways that she's able to contort her face to be very startling, I think is extremely well done. Peter does a really good job too, and you know, Alex Wolff, he does a really great job of sort of playing that part and playing basically the viewer, you know, the same person who's kind of like, what the hell's going on here? He does a really good job of that too. So I think Hereditary is really well worth the praise that it's gotten within the past 4 years. Ari Aster certainly did spark something here with Hereditary, and it's a really visceral, cerebral film, and I enjoy it. All right, so that's our Hereditary episode. We're going to be back next week with an episode on Funny Games, the original from Michael Haneke. Original Austrian movie, I should say. All right. So that should be fun. That one is pretty well known. Do you know the home invasion subgenre?
Mm-hmm.
That's what Funny Games is, and to me, Funny Games is the epitome of the home invasion movie. So we'll see if you agree.
It's not The Purge?
Nope, it's not The Purge. All right, so thanks for listening to our Difficult Films episode on Hereditary. We will be back next week, and if you want to be updated on all of the episodes that we do, you can subscribe to us on pretty much any podcasting app you can think of. We're on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, home base at anchor.fm. We're also on Good Pods. Most recently discovered that one, and you can actually tip us on there too, just so you know. We also have Facebook and Twitter. Just search for us there, Blood and Black Rum Podcast. We have an email address at bloodandblackrumpodcast@gmail.com. Let us know what you like, what you don't like, what movies you want us to cover, and we'll keep that in mind. And also, you can donate to us on our Patreon page at patreon.com/bloodandblackrumpodcast. Anything you can donate is really appreciated, when we will put it back towards beer. So just so you know.
Oh, I was gonna say, at this rate, don't put it towards beer. Put it towards all these 700 apps we need to fucking watch a film these days.
That's right. Yeah.
I just realized, I just got a message. My Netflix is going up to $15.99.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah, we're gonna have to.
It's $20 if you want to watch it in 4K. I didn't even realize they were charging for fucking picture quality. If you pay $9.99 a month, you only get it in 480.
Yep,
a bunch of bastards.
And then they're gonna take away your ability to share passwords too. So.
Yeah, I didn't even realize that until I saw it, because I haven't been on Netflix in fucking eons.
Yep. All right, so
it's bullshit.
Donate to us so that we can continue to fund all of these apps that we use to watch our movies.
So Ryan's sister can keep paying for Disney Plus and HBO Max.
Yep. All right, so we'll be back next week with our episode on Funny Games. Until then,
take care.